lot to be proud in this city. The diversity, the uniqueness of each region, and some of you probably noticed the Costco here in the Valley was in there, along with the Orange Line here in the Valley. And I also want to say that it's my privilege to get to introduce the mayor, even though I know he really doesn't need an introduction to most of you. I've known him for more than 20 years, and I met him when I was the transit police chief, so I know his commitment to public transportation, and I know his commitment to law enforcement. And both of them are unwavering. And I will tell you, when he was on the transit board, he made a point of cleaning up the graffiti on the buses, working hand in hand with the police department. Here at LAPD, he has been unwavering as far as hiring and recruiting. And he played 20 questions with me over the years of what do we look for in a new police officer? How do we train them? How do we equip them? And he took an active interest in all of it, and he has been unwavering and is a key reason as to why we've been able to drive crime rate down throughout the city and specifically here in the Valley. So I'm going to let him speak for himself. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you our mayor, Antonio Villaraigosa.
Thank you, Sharon. And, I wasn't fashionably late, by the way. I actually got here fairly early. I thought since the mayor hasn't fixed the traffic that I should make sure that I got here a little early, and I did. How are you? And I got here a little early, but I wanted to make sure. I knew that some people were late. Please come on in, all of you who over there. There's places to sit. I wanted to come by to begin with to say thank you. I started knocking on doors, and I knocked on a lot of doors in Van Nuys and Porter Ranch and Chatsworth and Granada Hills and Northridge and Studio City and Sherman Oaks. Really started in 1999. And I had mixers and tried to introduce myself because at the time I think I was at 6 or 7 in the polls, and a year out, in 2001, I was only at 9% in the polls, and my opponent was at 72. So when I say that this was a trek that many thought was impossible, it was. But I wanted to come back here, and I'm doing this throughout the city, because I really think it's important that I say thank you for the opportunity. I grew up here, as many of you know. My mom lived here her whole life. Grandpa came here 100 years ago. This, for me, was, I can't even say it was a dream come true, because I never dreamed or imagined that I would be sitting here as the mayor. And so, primarily I wanted to come to say thank you. I'll share a few of the successes, and then open it up to all of you. What's interesting about this video, though, and that you should know, we asked people, and I didn't actually, the videographer did, they just asked people, what do you like about LA? You know, a lot of times we hear from the naysayers, you know, the people who sometimes are angry about everything. And we don't think enough about people who actually love this place with all its problems and all its challenges. And as a native, I love this place. And I believe in this city. And so they asked, they didn't say they were working for the mayor or any of that. They asked, what do you think about LA? And they said those things, and then we put on the, what's it called, Cryon or whatever, we put, well, guess what? They like ridership. We're doubling the size of the rail system. They like that the city's safer. Well, you know, violent crime and homicides are down 49% in the last 8 years. So that's how that happened. So what I'll do is I'll break it down: public safety, public education, transportation and the environment, and then the issue of jobs in the budget, and then I'll open it up to you. First, public safety. Thank you, Sharon, for that introduction. Commander Papa and I have known each other, she said, for 20 some odd years. My mom rode the bus her whole life, and I was on the RTD board. And back then, if you remember, those buses used to have graffiti all over them. And I used to say, and I'd raise my hand up all the time and say, you know, the reason why people don't get on our buses is they look at the condition of those buses and they say, if they could do that to the bus, what will they do to me? Right? So we made safety on our buses a priority. We cleaned up those buses. And you saw on there the statistic, I was the author of the motion to turn all those dirty diesel buses. Now every single one, the only city in the world, every single one is a queuing fuel bus. And it started in 1992 when I was on board. And let's go to public safety. We've grown our police department. And I've been committed to that. We were the most, and still are, the most under-policed big city in the United States of America. And I said, because Bratton initially and then Beck said, you help me grow this police department, Mayor, and I guarantee you'll see a precipitous, thank you, a precipitous drop in crime. And we have. Grown the police department about 800 from where it was. Focused on community and constitutional policing. We've recruited a very, very diverse police force, many of whom grew up in the neighborhoods that they're actually policing. We've got a gang reduction and youth development initiative that is considered a best practice around the country, recognized by USAID and the Justice Department. They come to us when they go to El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala for our expertise. So what have we done in that time? 49% drop in violent crime, 49% drop in homicides. Gang crime, a 66% drop in homicides. Gang homicides, a 55% drop in gang crime. We've gone from in the 90s, the most violent big city in the United States of America, to, along with New York today, the safest big city in the United States of America. Public education. I know, and my staff will provide you with the documentation. What if I told you that in the last 8 years, we've doubled the number of successful schools at 800 and above? According to the state, 800 is the number on the academic performance index that you want, that they define as a successful school. We've doubled the number of those schools. We had a third of our schools that were failing. A third. 650 and below on the academic performance index. Now it's 10%. It's 1 out of 11. Still not good enough. Not good enough if your kid's in one of those failing schools, but it's a marked improvement. We had a 48% dropout rate, a 48% graduation rate. Today it's 65. We've tripled the number of charters, and not everybody's for charters, so okay. So at my State of the City, someone screamed out, I hate charters. Okay, tripled the number of charters, giving parents more choices and having some competition. By the way, they're public. They're not private, they're public. Tripled the number of charters. Have 116,000 kids in charters, but wait, we've increased 9-fold the number of charters at 800 and above. We have more successful charters in LA than any city in the country. I took over the partnership schools. I took over the toughest schools in LA, mostly in Watts, some in East LA and downtown. I said, give me the lowest performing, the most violent schools. I took over, you remember Markham, 120 kids arrested on campus in a middle school in Watts. After the first year, less than 20. After the second year, less than 10. We don't accept that kind of violence in our schools. But wait, if the partnership schools were a school district, and it's 16,000 kids, so it's bigger than Santa Monica, Malibu. If it was a school district, This year on the Academic Performance Index, it was the most improved school district in the state. And Jordan High School, you ever heard of Jordan High School in Watts? I took over Jordan High School. After 1 year, the most improved high school in California. 93-point increase on the API. Why am I talking about that? Because if you buy a home and you're looking for a home, what are you looking for? A great neighborhood public school as an anchor. Well, the same is with the city. I didn't have any jurisdiction over the schools, but I went to the legislature. They gave me jurisdiction. The school district fought me. I then helped elect a school board that would support reform. When that didn't work, when that worked, I've done it twice. I'm now in the third series of elections. Why? We're never going to be the city we need to be if our kids can't read and write. Our unemployment rate, and I'll talk about the economy in a minute, is as high as it is according to the economy because too many young people don't graduate from high school and go on to college in an economy where intellectual capital is what drives wealth creation. 3, transportation. 8 years ago, we had the subway to North Hollywood and the subway spur to Western. We had the Blue Line, and we were just opening the busway from North Hollywood to Woodland Hills. I actually opened it. But let's be honest, it started before me. What have we done since then? How about this? We've opened the Gold Line to East LA. We've opened the extension of the busway from Woodland Hills to Chatsworth. We've opened up the Exposition Line to Culver City. We've opened up, there's one more. No, I already said the Orange Line. The Gold Line to the east side.
Expo Line.
I beg your pardon?
Expo Line.
Expo Line.
Well, I already said Expo. We didn't open up Crenshaw yet. No. We'll figure it out right now. It's 4. It's Exposition, the 2 busways. Oh, and the Gold Line. And the Gold Line in East LA. So that's 4. So 4. We opened up 4. Okay? We've broken ground on phase 2 of Exposition, now from Culver City to Santa Monica. We've broken ground, a light breaking ground, which we called utility relocation, for the subway, the regional connector, and we're about to break down later on this year, got a $656 million TIFIA loan for the Crenshaw line, which will ultimately take us to the airport. I know it's taken longer than it was supposed to. It was supposed to get finished by June. It's not going to. But by next May, we'll have the 405 HOV lane, all the money gotten from our efforts in Sacramento, with the exception of the Berman's 130 from the feds. But this was a $1 billion project. All of it gotten from us knocking on doors, going to Sacramento, putting it in the bond, and the like. We're trying to accelerate all of that. Measure J passed in LA by 70%. It would allow us to bond against future years, not increase the Measure R. Oh, by the way, to do this, we put Measure R on the ballot, half-penny sales tax, generating $40 billion over 30 years. We're trying to accelerate it into a shorter period of time so we could double the size of the rail system, and importantly, show people that, guess what? The reason why we have so much traffic is because we're so addicted to the single passenger automobile, we're all going to have to get out of our car once in a while. We're doing 1,600 miles of bike lanes. The 120, by the way, was just in the last 2 years. When we're finished, by July 1st, we'll have done more bike lanes than Bradley, Reardon, and Hunt put together. All 3 administrations. And you know what? I know not everybody gets on a bike, but more of us are going to have to get on a bike. And if you notice, a lot more people are commuting on bikes today than they used to. The environment. You know, when we had the dirtiest public utility in the United States, and I know people complain about the DWP, and they're right to complain because we're not perfect. DWP still charges less for water and power than Southern California Edison. That's a fact. That's a fact. Now, would we like to drive it down still further? Yes. But they still charge less than Southern California Edison. But let's look at where they were in 2005. In 2005, 3% renewables, 49% dependent on coal, the dirtiest public utility in the United States of America. Today, we're at 20% renewables. With Gore, 3 weeks ago, with Al Gore, we announced that we have put the framework together to get completely off of coal, the only major American city, and we're going to do it by 2025. I know it wasn't popular. I know it wasn't popular. But you know what? What I've learned in this job, someone once wrote about me that because I didn't have a father, that, you know, around, that, you know, I ran for office because I wanted to be loved. I love these psychologists, you know, who don't know you and they kind of, you know. So I got to admit, all of us want to be popular. I mean, you know, you want people to like you, don't you? I mean, isn't that what we want? I mean, you know, you're in these jobs and you want people to like you. I'll tell you something I've learned in this job. Being popular isn't the most important thing. Looking in the mirror and doing what you think is right, even when it's not popular, is the better way to proceed ahead. So what do we do in the middle of that water crisis? I said to all of you, and I know it wasn't popular because I got the emails. I said, guess what? You can't water every day anymore. Nope. You can't water every day anymore, ma'am and sir, because we're down on our water and the cost of water is going up. So we can't do it. So remember I said you can only water your lawns twice a week? That wasn't, you know, everybody's grass getting brown. People weren't happy about it. Well, what if now we've increased it to 3 times a week, but you have to do it during certain hours. You can't just do it anytime you want. What's happened? We're using 20% less water than we did in 2005. We use the same amount of water today that we did in 1970. We have the lowest per capita water use of any major city in the United States of America. Why do we do that? Because we live in a semi-arid city and water isn't going to be there all the time. We're going to have to be smarter. The port. The port is the engine, the lifeblood of this town. We move 44% of all the seaborne goods that enter the United States. 44%. Almost 1 million jobs, direct and indirect, related to trade. For the longest time, one group of people said close down the port. Why? There's a public health consequence to the port activity. It's the biggest driver, other than cars, the biggest driver of the pollution in the region. So they say close down the port, I don't care. Well, I do. We can't, you know, we can't lose 1 million jobs in this region. The other side said, grow the port at all costs. We don't care that 1 million kids have respiratory issues because of the operation of the port. So we came up with a plan. And we said, hey, hold it. We got to grow the port. We need the money. We need the jobs. But we got to green the port. You can't green the port, do all the mitigations that you need unless you grow it. And you can't grow it because we were getting sued for years and they would stop us from growing it unless you green it, unless you protect the public health. Well, where our port, even except for 1 year in the last 8, in the worst recession since the 1930s, the port activity is up and up dramatically. Exports and imports. #1 port complex in the United States. We've dropped sulfur oxides, 76%. Diesel particulates, 71%. Nitrous oxides, 51%. Emissions from trucks, we have 9,000 new trucks at the port, 80%. So, When I signed on to Kyoto, which, as you know, the United States has never done, 150 mayors had done it by the time I got elected. Now, more than 1,000. LA, the city known for smog, and a city still with some of the dirtiest air. #1 American city in reduction of carbon emissions. 28% reduction. Only London, Copenhagen at 40, Berlin at 36, Toronto at 34 ahead of LA, the city that's known for the dirtiest air. So a lot of good things have happened. But here's some not so good things. Worst recession since the 1930s. Our pensions, because the markets went down, went into the red. We were looking at a $1.1 billion structural deficit, so you understand that's 25% of the general fund, which was at the time about $4.7 billion. If you look at everything, the port, the airport, the DWP, special funds and general funds, it's about $15 billion. But if you just look at the general fund, which is where the structural deficit was, it was 25% of the general fund. What were people saying back then? In fact, a friend of mine who used to have this job, they were saying we were going to go bankrupt. Do you remember that? Do you remember hearing that?
Yes. We
were going to go bankrupt. And I said, not on my watch. We're not going to go bankrupt. We're going to have to make tough decisions. So when I said, I've realized over time that being popular isn't the most important thing, what did we do to cut that structural deficit to now about 100 million? From 1.1 billion to 100 million. What did we do? We got our employees to go from 6% to 11% in their contributions to pensions. That is the #1 American city. New York didn't do it, Chicago didn't do it, Boston didn't do it, Philadelphia didn't do it, Miami didn't do it, Houston didn't do it. We got them from 6 to 11. They were paying too little. There's no question. 6 to 11. New employees used to be able to retire at 55, the civilians, at 55, and get 100% of their salary. Now, it's 65 and get 75. Why? I'm 60 years old. Yes, I'm 60 years old. We're living till we're 80. You can't have a pension system that is predicated on you living till you're 62 or 65 when you're actually living till 80. You got to fix that. We did furloughs. By the way, let me tell you a big mistake I made. You may have heard me say it on TV. Just before the recession happened, the CAO, Chief Administrative Officer, negotiates salaries. Some of our civilian employees hadn't gotten raises in a few years. They were making less than Department of Water and Power employees, which are not part of the general fund. It's separate and apart. That's not where the deficit was. So they negotiated a 25% increase over 5 years. Then the recession comes. They said we could afford it. They did this whole thing. Then the recession comes. Everything falls apart. I tried to get them to take the same 16% cut I took for 2 years. I said, no, I just said a 10% cut. Remember when I would say shared sacrifice? I took a 16%. I asked them for 10. They said no. I furloughed people. I eliminated a third of the LA General Fund workforce. So today, last week, I put a budget that if we move ahead, we're still at 100 million in deficit, but over the next 3 years, if we continue to make the tough decisions we've made over the last 4, we're going to be in a surplus in 3 years. But I felt compelled to do that because the biggest mistake I made was accepting a recommendation that said a 25% increase. You know, we unanimously voted for it. We were wrong to do it. And, you know, we've been trying to rectify ever since. So with that, I just want to open it up to you. And what I would like, you know, you could have, one thing about me, you know, I said I don't have to be popular. You could ask a tough question, you know, you could tell me, you know, whatever it is. We're not screening the questions. You ask whatever you want. Hopefully, I'll have somebody else pick. Why don't you pick so that the...
Commander Papa.
Or Commander Papa? You want to pick? Well,
I want to be safe.
This gentleman was leaning in his chair right from the beginning, so I would select him.
Measure L. Measure L.
measure out.
Positive. That's a positive.
Which one?
You didn't measure L for the library, sir.
Oh, Measure L for the libraries, yeah. Measure L was positive. There were a lot of things that happened that were positive that I haven't mentioned, but that was one of them. When I first became mayor, we opened up the libraries and funded them at a level that we had never done before. And then the recession came and we had to cut them pretty dramatically. And so we put on the ballot an initiative that said our libraries have to get a certain amount of money out of our budget. And that was a good thing. And thank you for that. I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll do
Can
it.
we ask you to use that one and then we can hand them your one so everyone can hear?
I'm Rosemary Jenkins. I just want to thank the mayor for his robust and enthusiastic obsession, maybe, with environmental improvements. And of course, I'm sure all of you or most of you know that the City Council voted to pass the Beyond Coal measure yesterday. And I want to thank the mayor in particular. When I was working with the Sylmar Library, low water use irrigation and native planting, he was there, and he's just the kind of mayor that we should be so proud of, because he set out goals and he has tried to meet every one of them. So I appreciate it.
Can I say something about that? Because I said this to the candidates. You know, by the way, I have a lot of respect for Eric Garcetti and Wendy Gruhl. And you know why? To put your name on the ballot, to raise your hand and say, I want to lead this great city, you know, it's not always easy, everybody. It's a lot harder than you think. And I also said to them, don't get intimidated by the naysayers. You know, in every article you'll ever read, you'll read, oh, well, he's a dreamer. He said, dream with me, LA. And he set this high standard. He was going to plant 1 million new trees. First of all, I planted, you know, maybe 100 over the last 4 years. I didn't plant. I don't do anything by all this stuff that I mentioned was all of us doing this stuff. But let's go through the 1 million trees. And actually, they finally in an editorial the other day acknowledged, okay, we said we're going to plant 1 million trees. So did New York, so did Houston, so did Denver, all around the same time. I did it first, and then they all kind of said, yeah, I like that 1 million trees. Then the recession comes. We're not even trimming trees, much less planting trees, so we couldn't get any general fund money for this. We had to raise the money from philanthropy to plant trees. So, what it didn't say was, okay, we're at 407,000, I think 407,000 trees. Well, I'll say 47 right now, but we're at 407,000 trees. 6 times more than we used to plant. 6 times more than we used to plant. U.S. Forestry Service says it's the model 1 million tree program in the United States because we've done this on a shoestring. We have a 50% better survival rate than the national average. California Forestry Service says we're not only the best 1 million tree program, we're the best urban forestry program in California. But you know what? They're right. We didn't get to 1 million. But if any of you ever played baseball or football or volleyball, do you go up to bat and say, I think I'm going to strike out? You know, everybody, when you get up to bat, you want to hit, But the real hit you want is you want a home run. And so I said to the two candidates, don't be afraid. You know, my whole life, I always pushed. Even when I fell down, and everybody knows it's been chronicled all over this town how many times I've fallen down. Even while I was mayor, I've fallen down a lot. But you got to get up. And I pray whoever gets elected mayor understands, don't be afraid to swing for the fences. Sometimes you hit them, sometimes you don't. You just get up and go back. You go back at bat in the second inning, right? And you try to hit it again. And we ought to be supportive of that notion. Because you're not going to get it all. Because people ask me, what else would you like to do? Well, as much as crime has gone down, I'd like to see it go down even further. Particularly in some neighborhoods. Crime has gone down 50% in Watts. 50% in Watts. But you know what? It's still ground zero. 77th and Southeast, that's still ground zero. 66% drop in gang crime, but too many kids are losing their lives to gun and gang violence. So we still got a lot of work to do. So thank you for that, but there's still a lot of work to do. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. You're picking them. Okay.
I remember when you were running for office, Mr. Mayor, and I bumped into you at the police academy. And you said, Blinky, when I get into office, I'm going to fix this. We're going to make it right somehow. We're going to go in the right direction. And I want to applaud you for that publicly. Because the numbers that you're boasting to have people standing up, whistling, and jumping up and down, in particular in the communities where mothers have lost their children. The esprit de corps that's happening with law enforcement and community is something that a lot of people thought they never see. And there's a real gelling going on. There's a real coming together of this whole notion of we're all responsible for public safety, and I know a lot of that has to do also with your leadership. Here comes the future. Antonio Villaraigosa is going to be doing other things, and your forecast, what do you see for the prevention, the intervention that's going on that also has been side by side with the issues of public safety?
I hope, by the way, the gang reduction and youth development efforts are so now nationally renowned that philanthropy never gives the city of Los Angeles money because they feel like or any government because they feel like it's going down a black hole, right? So they won't give you money. Philanthropy is paying for half of Summer Night Lights. Summer Night Lights is the violence reduction program where around 32 parks, 750,000 visits last year, 750,000 visits. We fed 450,000 people and dramatically reduced crime around those park areas. And for the first time, kids and families have places to play in the summer in neighborhoods where historically they don't go out at night. And when Christopher Dorner was terrorizing this town, there were gang members and interventionists in Watts and other areas who would tell the chief and some of the command staff, hey, we got your back. We're there for you. That guy's not coming. I mean, when did people, when did we have that kind of relationship? We actually have an intervention academy where the chief and we go and I speak at the intervention academy. These are former gang members that are working to reduce violence, particularly the retaliation shootings that happen in the community. That's how crime's gone down, in part because before what would happen, one person kills one person, the other person killed the other person, and then it's 8, 7, 5 in retaliation. We're dramatically reducing that. The esprit de corps that you mentioned is incredible. One day, we're going to have to invest a lot more in the prevention intervention side. That's an area where we can really get some growth. But yes.
Oh, hi. My name is Paul Nunn. I'm a local business owner. I own the 7-Eleven just down the street. I'm also on the Van Nuys Neighborhood Council. So I have a question for you. You challenged Eric Garcetti and Wendy Gruhl, I know them both, to give details about how they would fix the schools, have really a detailed vision. But what do you expect them, like, what would you expect? What would you want to hear from them as far as that detailed
That's a
vision?
good question. First of all, you can't say, by the way, before Reardon, who also got involved for one election cycle, basically what Tom did, what Reardon did, what Han did, was they grew LA's best. There are 180 LA's best today. I've done 60 of the 180. I've done a third. 60 of the 180. If all I wanted to do was tinker around the edges, after school programs would be a nice thing to do. I did it. When we had a third of our schools failing and half of our kids not graduating, that's not enough. So what I've said to them is, you're going to have to get involved. You can't say, this isn't my jurisdiction. We're starting to see middle-class kids go to elementary schools in much bigger numbers than they used to. And now even some of the magnates in the middle schools and even some of the high schools. Not anywhere near what we need. We've got to continue to improve the schools. It's the key to the economic future of the city. It's the key. So you can't say, well, it's not my job. Well, yeah, it's all of our jobs. And so the plan, it's pretty clear. We got to grow the graduation rate, because 65% is better than 48, but it's not good enough. In this economy, every one of our kids have to graduate from high school. Every one of them. And a good portion, the vast majority, got to go to college or get a skill. One of the two. So we've got to absolutely commit ourselves to that. The plan to get there, we could disagree on how we get there, but the goals, rigorous curriculum. When they passed the A through G curriculum, it said you have to have a college-ready curriculum. Some people objected and said, well, not everybody can go to college. And that's true. But let me tell you something. Do you know how many families, when I'm at an event, someone will send me a note. You gave me a note right now. I get those all the time. Somebody will give me a note, and then I'll read it. And you know almost always what it says? Can you get my daughter a job? Can you get me a job? Can you get my son a job? So I usually will ask one of my staffers, I'll say, okay, hook them up with the Worksource Center. They'll say, let's talk to the trades. Maybe the trades can help us. Invariably, I get a note from one of the union leaders, from the work, the hiring halls. I tried to hire this young kid. He can't even do basic math. He dropped out of high school. He's never taken algebra or geometry. You now need a college-ready, at least those math classes to be a carpenter, a plumber. It's not like the old days. You need all of that. So when we say college-ready, experience, in order to get a good job, you need to have some of these skills. So that would be my hope. And I said it. I know the press love to pit people together, because I've not said anything about the mayor's race, if you notice. I'm focused on the mayor's job. So I'm letting everybody else focus on the mayor's race. But I only said that to encourage them, because I have a lot of respect for both of them, as I said. I want to see them do it. You'll see. I'll be their biggest cheerleader. Why? Because I know how tough this job is. I've been in this job for a period of time. And because I started out by thanking you. I love this town. I believe in it. I love that so many people, just on their own, they went all over the city, just on their own. I mean, there's things wrong with LA, of course, but there's a lot of things right. Look at all the New Yorkers. Any New Yorkers here? Look at all the New Yorkers there. I love when they tell me how much they love New York, and they all live here. Our kids go to the East Coast to school. They always come back, and it's not just the weather. Look at this. Look at one of the reasons why I love the Valley so much. Look at how diverse the Valley is. Do you know that the most diverse section of the city, it's not the west side, it's not the south side, it's not the east side, it's the San Fernando Valley. The most diverse part of the valley. But in order to live well with one another, we got to educate our people. They've got to have skills. We've got to have good jobs. And that's why the education piece is so important. Yes.
Mr. Mayor, thank you so much for your years of service to LA. We are so happy that you've done all the work for us, especially Measure L. We're very, very pleased about your support for that. 2 quick questions for you. Number one, my sister used to always call me and say, doesn't he have a twin brother? Because one person could not be in all the places he is at one time. And I assured her you didn't. But my question is, 2 quick ones. The Port of LA, there is the discussion of the new Panama Canal going through, and how much business is that going to take away from us? How should our new mayor prepare for that? And the second question is, since you've worked so hard for 8 years, we want to know after you rest up, what's next on the agenda?
You know, you saw that when I first got elected, there was a lot of talk about Panama and what Panama would do to LA, completely take our preeminence as a West Coast port. So you saw we're investing $1.5 billion, 20,000 jobs. We just announced the dredging of the main channel. The dredging of the main channel allows the biggest ships in the world to come through our port. Panama, when they open in 2015, will have the next generation of ships, but not the biggest ships. So we're going to have the next with this main channel deepening, the next generation and the generation after that, the biggest ships that are getting built right now. All of them will be able to come through our port. So that's 1. 2, with the $500 million project, which is on top of the 1.5 we're doing, the SCIG, which is a near-dock rail. Rail is going to help us compete with Panama because rail can move goods faster than a ship or a truck. So with the near-dock rail, with the on-dock rail that we already have, our studies indicate that we're going to hold our own with Panama. We're going to remain the #1 port on the West Coast. But never rest on your laurels. I'm keynoting the port conference, which is all the ports that are coming to LA in a couple of weeks. We're continuing to invest in the port because we get that it's an engine for our jobs. I'll address what I think I'm going to do, because if you saw the New York Times article, it said, "No job, no car, no regrets." Actually, there was a beginning to it. I said, "No house, no car, no job, no regrets." That's the short version. I'll tell you what I'm kind of thinking, but I'll do that at the end.
Mayor Villaraigosa, my name is Anthony Aquino. I've been a resident of San Fernando Valley for 34 years, and I thank you for bringing Los Angeles and making it the 2nd greatest city in the United States during your tenure. I'm almost reluctant to talk about the subject of safety that I wanted to bring to your attention today, and that is, I'm a business owner, small business owner in North Hollywood on Sherman Way and Laurel Canyon.
Know where exactly
It is the Sherman Way Industrial Center that I have my business. And it has an entrance and egress difficulty that causes several times a month very serious accidents, bringing to our premises 4 government agencies. These government agencies are ambulance, fire department, police, and then insurance police who come to look at the accident and do tape measures and whatnot. They do a great job, but the traffic situation causes that problem, and it has to be addressed by somebody. My concern is that the two government agencies, the police department and the fire department, who I have a lot of respect for, they should be able to combine the times that they go to this area repeatedly every month for the same condition and say to themselves, look, someone has to do something about this. The police respond, the fire department responds, and yet several times each month for the past 34 years, this condition has existed.
What we'll do is, because really there's another agency that should be involved, and that's transportation. We should do a traffic study there to look at the number of accidents that are happening there. We'll also look at, you know, what we can do with LAPD traffic. Accidents, you know, I talked about the great things about San Fernando Valley. The number one place for accidents and vehicular deaths is here. You know, you have big wide streets and people go very, very fast. And, I mean, on my BlackBerry, whenever I see fatal collision, it disproportionately for the population, it's up here. It just is. So we'll look at this. We'll get a traffic study done. We'll look at, you know, how we use traffic motorcycle officers as well. But probably a traffic study is going to say we're going to have to do some traffic calming there to slow it down, I would assume. Yes. Yes.
My name is Kambiz Marabi. I'm a building owner in the neighborhood. First, I want to thank you for your leadership in this tough time, especially the financials. I wanted to know what you recommend to the next mayor for this crisis of homeless, especially in Van Nuys, that they're coming here because we have jail system and they don't leave. As a building owner, it takes away from the value of our building.
You know, LA, Santa Monica, the Venice part of LA, downtown, part of what is called the homeless capital. We used to be we still are the gang capital. You know, gang crime is way down, but we still have more gangs than any city of the country. You know, I don't know if you know, the Crips, the Bloods, Mara Salvatrucha on 18th Street, all started in LA, and now they're, some of them international. They all started in LA. Homelessness, we're also the homeless capital, the county area. They're disproportionately downtown, but they're all over the city. We've done 2,700 permanent supportive units of housing in LA in the last 8 years. 2,700. In the 12 years before, we did 726. So we've done almost 4 times. But the way the experts say you deal with homelessness, you got to deal with the chronically homeless. The county at the time, for a good part of these 8 years, the county would only cite the services. They provide the services, we do the housing. They'd only do it downtown. You know, the county supervisor said, hey, I can't have all the homeless. You know, what about Hollywood? What about Van Nuys? What about Venice? You know, how about having housing for the homeless everywhere? They can't all be downtown, because almost all of the housing disproportionately is in the downtown area. We're now starting to work better. They're realizing they can't just put it all downtown. We were putting families who were homeless as a priority, but the way to really deal, families tend to not be on the streets very long. Month, 2. The chronically homeless are there for years. So we're starting to work better together. And I think you're going to see us